Welcome to seminar number 4. We have a lot to get through, so this video is going to be, I'm aiming for 35-40 minutes, so we're going to try and get through as much as we can. You're going to be pushing pause and remember to answer the questions below. I always like to start with Marcus here. He's definitely going to have the spirit of today's presentation. But to begin is half the work. Let half still remain. Again, begin this, and thou wilt have finished. Keeping this in mind, I think we can all agree that starting is one of our hardest challenges. Why? I want to remind you of the student life cycle. And to remember to be kind to yourself. Don't be too hard on you. Your entire environment is setting yourself up that the tasks that were really easy in September are now really difficult in November and December. The weather, the course load, the complexity of the information you're trying to learn, and the multiple deadlines. We've got a lot going on that we have to be managing. We've set some really good goals up here to try and keep this motivation, to keep us alive. We've been getting some results, and depending on where your results are heading, maybe you're a little bit higher or even a little bit below where you expect it to be. One thing that we can do is always invoke some strategies to help improve motivation, to improve our mood, to give us that little bit of energy to get going, just like Marcus asked us to do. He asked us to get started. In the seminar, I asked the students to express some gratitude. So if this one works for you, you can quickly take out your phone and send a text message or send an email to someone that you meant to thank. If you wanted to thank someone you've been meaning to, quickly write up a thank you message, thanking them for whatever it was, and just saying that you're really grateful that they were able to do something for you. We can always do that. There have been studies into gratitude journals, and one of the ones that is more appropriate to academics is doing this before an exam. They had a look at being able to reduce stress, and there was a report, students report greater well-being during the exam and less anxiety during the exam. Listening to music, we've all had that experience when the song comes on, you're on the bus or you're driving and that song comes on the radio or on your playlist, and that one song can just give you so much energy when, even at the end of the day when you are exhausted, even when it is November or December, it's cold, and you can get yourself fired up, and it's very, very quick. Hugging someone has been shown to also have a neurochemical and a physiological response on the body. This could be difficult to do if you don't have, clearly you want to do this with someone you know. Don't do it to a stranger. Buying a pet, this may not be feasible, so I'm not encouraging you to buy a pet. Please don't do that. Definitely, if you have a pet, get involved. There's furry friends on campus. If you're not sure what that is dogs that have gone through training, and they help. They attend clinics and senior citizens' homes, and they also come on campus during Unwind Your Mind to help relieve stress. So if you're a dog person, be on the lookout for them. If not, then go on Facebook or YouTube and do a search for cats and dogs being friends, something like that. You'll be able to get something out of it. This is what we need to cover. We're going to be looking at procrastination, error analysis, and exam planning. So let's get right into it. We're going to notify you around the first week of December if you have passed or failed the online course. It's very easy for you to tell. Just have a quick look at the activity schedule and calculate your point value. If you got 80% in the quiz, then calculate you get 2 points for passing that, or you get 4 points or 6 points, and just add those up. If those points equal 80, then you passed it. If you equal 75, don't worry. After the seminar after November 30th, there's still a couple of activities. You still have the evaluation that would be included. You still have 3 seminars, and you also have the letter assignment. So I think there's 8 marks after that first period. So you're still on track to pass it. If you're experiencing any anxiety towards your GPA at the moment, please reach out and ask for help. It's actually better to email the fstart at UAlberta email, and then that'll get through to us a little bit quicker. Exam deferrals is a thing. You definitely want to know the rules if this happens to you. If you miss a final, you want to reach out immediately. Don't put this off. If you've missed a final, you reach out, you contact your professor immediately, and then you get into the registrar's office, Student Connect. This link tells you exact steps that you need to follow. Do it. Withdrawing, it's a pretty simple process now. They've changed it to online. However, since you're in the Fresh Start program, you still need, there's other requirements that have to be taken into account. So you do have to meet with us. It's a quick 10-15 minute appointment. Just to filter some of you out. If you're in 3 courses, you can't withdraw down to 2. If you're in 4, yes, you can withdraw down to 1. So if you are in 3 and you're still wishing to withdraw, and you fill in the online form but don't reach out to us, we still get notified by the registrar's office. And so then we still get to approve it or not. So if you're really considering it, come find out what the consequences are. As I said, it's pretty quick. It's a pretty quick process right now. Resources, like I said, we've already been looking at the student life cycle. It's a pretty stressful time. These are some resources that you have available to you. If anything physical is really bothering, if you are sick, reach out and get some help. Go see a doctor. It's worth the wait just to rule things out, let alone find out if something's wrong. Counseling and clinical services and peer support offer someone to listen to, someone that is completely objective and is a professional listener. If you're finding that you are overthinking things, if you're feeling depressed or stressed or overwhelmed or burnt out, it's time to ask for help. Right now, we can do a lot more right now than we can in December. And it just compounds. So reach out, ask for help, and see how we can alleviate some of the stress or feelings of overwhelm that you are experiencing. As I mentioned, Furry Friends are on campus in November, December. The dates that they have online right now are for last year. So just be on the lookout for them. If you're interested, send me an email and we'll try and find it, or do a Google search. We have a couple of workshops coming up, final exam planning. We're going to be quickly talking about that. But here, we've missed the 4th one that was over the weekend. Now, November 8th is this week, so you could reach out and try and get into that. Also, if you've got in-class essays, I highly recommend getting into this 2-hour workshop. Tells you how to prepare and also how to do well during the in-class essay. Let's jump right into procrastination. We're all experiencing it. We all do this to a degree. Some of us are extreme, some of us are minimal. Let's have a look at why. Procrastination is typically is defined as an avoidance behavior. You are avoiding doing a particular task for some reason, and the thing that you do is typically centered around the center part of our brain here. In our limbic system, we'll be looking for, it's in control of fear and reward, arousal, pleasure. So what it's going to do is every time we experiencing something that feels overwhelming or is boring or is distracting, something is distracting, then it's pleasurable, we'll go do that thing. If it is stressful, it induces the stress response. So we will either fight or flight or freeze. When it's to do with fight, it doesn't mean we're trying to save ourselves and we're trying to fight against an attacker. When it comes to doing our assignment or writing our essay or studying for our exam, it means excessive worrying. Fighting means you worry about what needs to be done, all the tasks that need to be done. So excessive worrying is the fight response there. The flight response is avoidance. That's procrastination. We'll typically jump in and find anything else that we could do to do it. My apartment is ridiculously clean, and that's how I know I'm procrastinating, is that I'm cleaning the kitchen again. So when I notice that the house is super clean, and it has the byproduct, that it has the consequence of being reinforcing because I get a clean apartment. So typically our procrastinating behavior, the thing we do, offers us pleasure, gives me some reward. So then I now get through all of that, I feel good, I'm like, oh great, excellent. However, what comes next is guilt and frustrations that I still haven't done the task that I set out to do. So we're all going to be experiencing this. what we need to do is, that's why we talk about strategies. We need to incorporate strategies to first notice, hey, I am avoiding, I am procrastinating. I'm noticing that this is happening, because this will happen. As we said, that this is the limbic system, this is one of the older parts of our brain. It's going to be automatic. We don't have too much control over here. What we do have control over, though, is noticing that it's happening and then making a choice. Every time there is, I think it was Viktor Frankl said that between stimulus and response, there is a choice. And we looked at this in the first seminar. There is a choice between that we get to choose. Do I want to be on track or off track? Push, pause, and notice. So that push, pause activity, hopefully you're still incorporating it. Push, pause, and pick a strategy. Am I on track or off track? These are 5 things that we can do. The golden rule for procrastination is the actions of something come before the feelings of something. So here, if it's confidence or intelligence or competence, or in this case, productivity, the actions of productivity come before the feelings of productivity. I feel guilty. First of all, I was cleaning the house, so I felt productive. But then when I look at my actual goal was to start writing in my essay, my 15-page essay, I start feeling guilty because the actions I did, I avoided doing. I procrastinated about my assignment, so then I felt guilty and regretful. So if I started doing my assignment, I would start feeling productive. Start doing the actions that you want to be doing. What are the things that are important to you? Everyone's going to be different. All these activities can be different. Start working your plan and you will gain control. You will get stronger and stronger. This will start reinforcing and it'll become easier and easier and easier. But it's really, really hard in the beginning because we keep getting taken away. We keep avoiding because it's automatic. We have to consciously notice this is happening and then choose. So the first thing we can do is take a deep breath. We have to give ourselves, like I said, there's that little space between stimulus and response. If you notice yourself procrastinating, get yourself back on track with some positive self-talk. Take a breath. Give yourself a little bit of time to make a choice. Take a timer and use that urgency. As some people respond to a sense of urgency. So take your phone, set a timer for 5-10 minutes, and then pick a task that you have to do, and then do it just for that period of time. And then you get to, as that alarm goes off, you get to decide, okay, 10 more minutes or stop and move on. If we follow Marcus is going to say starting is the hardest part. So let's just give the starting part a little bit of urgency, a little bit of energy to get us fired up. Start before you feel ready is another way of saying the golden rule. Just get going and the feelings will come. Remove any physical and mental distractions. A lot of you have been getting good at this. A lot of you highlight this in your learning checks, that you want to remove your phone, put your phone away, use any of the apps on your laptops to hide social media. And then mental distractions. This one's challenging. This one here is, if we are doing excessive worrying, this doesn't manifest physically. This is all thoughts inside our heads. So one thing that we can do with mental distractions is to make note of them. Some of you, while listening to me talk for 13 minutes and 6-7 seconds, are probably been thinking about something else. Some of you are probably doing something else. Are you doing either of these things well? We can't have all of our resources at each spot. During the seminar, easily 90% of the hands went up saying, I've thought about something that I'm worrying about, something I had to do in the past, or something that I need to do in the future, or something that's coming up that's important to them. However, they can't do anything about it during that. They didn't solve it. During that period, during the seminar, they're unable to act upon that. So it just becomes wasted mental energy. So make a note of it. It's important to us, so we don't worry and stress about things that are unimportant. So make a note of it. Just have a sticky note next to your piece of scrap paper. Write it down every time something comes up that's on your mind, that is going to take you off track, that you're going to try and solve, but you can't solve. Make note of it. Go back to work. Get back on track. Remember to take breaks after whatever you've noticed, 20 minutes, 30 minutes, 40 minutes, you'll start improving. Once we get practice to doing this push, pause, am I on track, off track, like I said, this becomes self-fulfilling and really reinforcing, and we get stronger and stronger. We're able to focus for longer and longer and longer. But we still need to take breaks. We'll make poorer choices if we've been working too long. This one here is another important one, error analysis. A lot of students during the survey that I made did not do midterm review. So what I want to do is just offer you a systematic approach to having a look at midterm reviews, and we'll also tell you how to prepare for your next midterms if you have second ones, or also for finals. We need to analyze the test. We need to ask ourselves what went wrong, and then we ask ourselves why did it go wrong. We don't want to put this down to external events. Some of these might pop up as I'm talking in a second here. Analyzing the test comes in two parts. We just want to find out what did we get wrong, and then we need to, the two parts are the type and the content. What type of question was it, and what was the content? So I'm just looking for all the ones I got wrong. So I have to look at the question. I have to identify, is that a fact question, a concept question, a skill question, and what was the topic? Let's have a look at an example of this. Positive reinforcement is the topic. I go into my psychology, 100 level psychology class, and here's my fact, concept, skill questions. These are all questions about this topic. Here, the fact one asks for an increase in behavior from the addition of a stimulus. Here, this is just a straight definition from our textbook. This is a fact. This is definition by textbook or by lecture. Concept question. Jimmy started to hit Peter more often because the teacher always gave him attention. This here is an example of positive reinforcement, so I have to be able to label it. So we call this a concept question because it's definition by example. Your professors are going to give you a new example that you have to be able to label. So you have to be able to identify a textbook definition of this topic or definition by example. Then finally, as a skill question, apply positive reinforcement. How does PRI apply in your life? Give an example. So you have to create your own new example. So it's still very similar to concept, but this time you have to think of your own example from your own life, which is quite challenging as well. So here we have to go through and we want to identify the topic. We want to identify the type of questions. Let's have a quick look. Here's an econ example. What's the type of question? This one here, if we read it, it's a fact question. This one here is a star athlete can afford a garage full of exotic cars. So as soon as we hear this, we can see that this is going to be an example. So this is definition by example. The next one is, suppose the province of Manitoba promises to decrease taxes. Again, another example for the province of Manitoba. And we can go through like this. Identify these. Identify the ones you got wrong. Here's our content. Did I get fact questions, concept questions, or skill questions wrong? We want to then have a look at the content type. For example, incentive and marginal cost. That was a concept question. Positive versus normative statements, concept. Characteristics of theories was factual. So why did it go wrong? Now that I've got this information, these are the three that I got wrong. I say that these are the ones I got wrong. It was a concept question. I got the concept type question wrong. What we might notice is that there's going to be a pattern. It's going to notice that the topic was conceptual and the test question was conceptual, and I may have been studying. If I look at my lecture notes, or if I look at my notes of the text, I was studying factually. However, I was tested conceptually. I was studying conceptually, and yet I was tested factually. So we need to, this is a way to notice, and this here breaks our rule. And the new rule for all of your exams and midterms going forward is test appropriate practice. We must practice the same way we're going to be tested. If you're going to be tested for in an essay long answer, it would be pointless practicing the same way you'd prepare for a multiple choice test. The same way in sports, if you were going to be playing in a basketball competition on Saturday, it would make no sense to do marathon training and just running long distance during the whole week. There would be no point to that. This gives us a chance to see the difference and see concretely that I broke this rule. I was studying factually and being tested conceptually, or whatever the pattern may be. The next thing that we can take into account is to look at the test taking. We're a little bit biased during this, but we can see, did I make some silly mistakes? Did I misread? Did I run out of time? Did I find myself blanking out? Or again, these reports are going to be different. After the exam, we could be thinking, oh man, I did terrible on that, and then you'll come up with all of these reasons why you thought you did terrible. Then you get the results back and you're surprised. You're like, oh, I did way better than I thought. Maybe I do know this stuff. So these things can be a little bit biased. look at your motivation and commitment. Did you spend, were you committed to doing this? Did you procrastinate a lot preparing for this? Check how much time you actually put into this. Did you actually have time compared to another one? Were you monitoring your performance? Were you using self-quizzing, self-testing as a means of identifying that you know this material or you don't know this material? Physical and social environment, we're starting to get minimal impact on your midterm here, but these are still things that we can take into account. Okay, let's get into exam strategies. Test appropriate practice, what we talked about. First of all, we must plan. So here's steps for planning. Collect information, make a list of everything you need to cover, find time to cover. You have to estimate how much time you need to cover, find the time, start plugging in those tasks and topics to that time, and then we're going to talk about setting intentions. We want to look at preparing the material and testing ourselves, and how can we do that over time, and then finally committing to each session. What is your ideal preparation for a final? Start planning it now. What do you want your day to look like? Make that happen. If you want to have time for the gym, plan that out. Start earlier so that you can do a workout. If you want to have time to socialize, then plan that in, and then move these things around. The earlier we start, the better the design. You can start designing the life that you really want. Collect your information. This doesn't just mean the topics. This means dates and times, how long it is, the format, the content that's going to be covered, weighting, and clearly you need the name of the class. But here we want to, and any resources you need, here we want to help make some decisions. We can use this information to start deciding. Next, we want to use our content manager here. Just make a list of the topic and where you need to get the information from, and also an estimate of how much time you want to put in. Please excuse the sound effects coming up. Another way of doing this is, a nice way to do this is side by side. Here is an example that I typed up from a student. 3 classes, 3 different sets of material, and then the format of the final, and also the grade. I believe the student here said that the multiple choice one was going to be more challenging than the essay ones. So they were, this one here, they were a little bit more nervous about. So they feel like there's more information to cover. Construct the schedule. You can either use a calendar, you can use anything you want. Use Google Calendar. Just start sketching it out on a piece of paper. This one here is something that we have that you could work. If you do the workshop where you work with someone in person, this is the one that we use, but we can use anything. Put your fixed activities across the top. Put your plans down the bottom. In here we do have a quick reminder that the purpose of starting early, this is, some of you are probably noticing the dates up here, this is the winter version. We want to take advantage of these space retrieval practices. We definitely want to be doing several reviews, as our retention will improve over time and it will last longer. So instead of cramming, we actually get to keep this material for longer. So it's going to be a part of our knowledge. Here's setting the intentions. We want to divide our studying time. So if we set aside 2 hours on a Sunday here, we may want to spend 1 hour 45 preparing material and then 15 minutes retrieving. Reviewing here doesn't mean rereading, right? Retrieving means recalling. This means self-quizzing of some sort. Test yourself on your fact, concept, and skill questions. Setting aside some time. So now if we do this early enough, we can prepare material. Reading week's a perfect time to start preparing. Setting aside some time to start preparing. Choose one of your quizzes, choose one of your finals, that you think has a lot of information to memorize. Memory is the byproduct of studying, of doing the work. It's not a technique in itself. We want to prepare a lot of material and then self-test ourselves so that we can overlearn it. These are some of the techniques, some of the strategies you can use in each of those. Again, refer to Fresh Start Advisor or your the online course Cognitive Strategies under the Learning section. The intention to test yourself, to quiz yourself, is so important. We want to remind you about the fact, concept, and skill questions. You can always make these. If your professor gives you a study guide, great. If they don't, start asking these questions of yourself. Another example of these is the mean in statistics. It is the result of dividing it. I'm not going to read all of these. You can see that this here is a factual definition. This one here is definition by example using fantasy football. And then finally, here is the verb calculate. You have to know the rules and the steps to be able to do this. How do we do this in our textbooks? Highlight the headings, highlight any bolded words, and start asking questions. Define contingency. Nice fact question. Explain contingency by using an example. Okay, this is definite. This is conceptually understanding it. This is also skill, is that I have to create my own. Here, maybe I find an example in here, but I could also have to create my own example. Here is another question saying, what is not an example of contingency and why? This here is great for skill question as well, and conceptual questions. We could always use these types as well. What is not an example? Why? We could always put the why, tap why onto the end of any of the conceptual questions. Explain is another good term. What is the difference between deprivation and satiation? If we have two things under one heading, then we know that these might be two types of something. These are two types of establishing operations. So we can start asking, okay, what's the difference between the two? If we have a lecture, here is one from, I think it's biology. We can go through and we can highlight. Here's a lovely outline which tells me how it's all organized. Professors even said concept. What they're saying here is definition and examples. That's what we need. We may be looking at characteristics, but highlight the content that you want to learn, then make a list of questions. If your professor gives you the list of questions, great, but you want to be taking advantage of. They might best be giving you fact questions or just giving you skill questions, so you need to cover the other amount. Finally, use your textbook. Take advantage of these practice tests at the back. These here are excellent for helping us to improve our overlearning. We have to get to a point where these questions, our answers to these questions, come automatically. We want to really incorporate these. We have to overlearn the material, mainly because on the exam, we're under time pressure. So the more I want to practice these quizzes frequently. Frequent, low-stake tests are going to be a godsend to your studying routine, especially preparing for multiple choice finals, exams. We have to do 100 questions in 100 minutes. We want to be able to have that information on the tip of our tongue. Now, we're not predicting every single question on here, but the content that we have, the knowledge that we now have, should be able to answer that information. Also, the knowledge of knowing what type of, oh, this is a fact question, or this is a concept question, that there helps us to recall that information as well. Do these tests several times under time pressure. Time yourself for 10 minutes and see if you can answer these questions. The first time you do this, it's going to be difficult. It's going to take a very long time. You won't be able to do it very quickly. The second time you do it, you'll get faster. The third time you do it, if you have enough spaced repetition, enough space between that you're just about to forget this information, you want to reinforce it, reminding your brain, hey, I want this information is important. I want to have easy access to it. Please remember it. Make a list of your own questions, keep track of and score it. Another way to look at this is dividing 3 weeks into 6 working days. Find 2 hours per day. That'll give you immediately 36 hours of total prep. Starting from your exams and working backwards, that'll tell you when to start preparing for your finals. After December 7th, you can always commit more time. That's the last day of classes. Depending on your last exam, you'll have more or less time. As a rule, you can decide on this, but I typically advise students that test days are not work days. Give yourself a break just for finals. If you have a final on that day, don't do anything. Just try to recover. Divide your courses into those 36 hours. So if you're taking 3 or 4 courses, and you've already made a list of the format, you know which one's the priority for you. Now you can divvy up these 36 hours to preparation and testing for these. Be really specific with each week. Take 1 week and prepare. Prepare as much material as you can. You're still studying at this time, so you won't be able to prepare everything. So week 2, you're starting to prepare that final topics that are going to be covered on your exam, and you're studying that test appropriate practice. And then finally, week 3 in the build up, all you're doing is practice exams, practice problems, and practicing fact, concept, and skill questions if you're not in a technical course. Clearly, you're going to prioritize the courses that need more time and assign courses and work sessions to a monthly calendar. Finally, divide the material to be covered over the work session. Let's have a look at this. Here's our list of topics. The student is in 3 classes: sociology, math, and history. Finally, take out your November and December monthly calendar. Put in the 2 hours. here, this is a reading week, so you can commit more than 2 hours per week for the preparation stage, and then a reminder on the exam stage here. On exam, don't do any studying on the exam days. Even give yourself a day off. The student here gave themselves a day off after the last day of classes. They could relax, socialize, have a good time, and then hit the ground running. They may have been a little bit, depending on how much prep they've done. Math 114 came up pretty quick, and it's worth a lot. So they would probably change their mind once they got closer. They'd want to do a little bit more. So here we can see that we have math every single week. Math every single week. Math every single week. So we have plenty of time. The earlier we start, the more time we can spread this out and take advantage of distributed learning. Then if we do our preparation stages here of all generating all our questions, generating all our concepts and our conceptual understanding, and then down here we can just be focusing in on practice problems, solving problems, answering questions for all of these. Knowing the exam. We're at 30 minutes here. We're going to go through the 4 different types of questions you'll get on an exam. What we know about exams is, number one, is that different tests require different prep. That's why starting earlier helps too. That preparation stage is we need to have different strategies. We'll use different strategies for each type of test question we're doing. We know that they're going to cover fact, concept, and skill questions. Some may have a larger ratio than others. Multiple choice questions have distractors and foils. How do we deal with plausible answers that look like they are, well, plausible, but are not the correct answer? How do we deal with that? A percentage of questions in an exam are to separate B and A grades. This here, the example that I give for students is going through a multiple choice test. You get halfway through, there's one of those questions that you just spend 20 minutes on, even 10 minutes in a midterm when you've only got 50 minutes to work. 10 minutes can be devastating. That you now have to do the rest of the exams, 10, 15, 20 questions that have answers you could have done, but now that you're rushing, more likely to make a mistake. So we definitely want to take advantage of going through and really focusing in on learning 80% of this material really, really well, so then we can save some time to tackle the harder questions. Short answer questions need several parts to be complete. One of the biggest complaints that we see from professors is, you've just said this 3 different ways. So how can you keep adding value to your short answer questions? And time is going to be the major factor that creates that pressure. So how do we deal with that? 4 different types: multiple choice, short answer, essay questions, and problem solving questions. Let's look at each one in turn. I did say in here, what strategies do you use? Just keep that in mind, and see if you recognize what you do, and if not, then start incorporating it and give it a name, so that you have this data. But you're consistently building this database of strategies. There's a lot of research into how to write a good multiple choice question. You might see that professors, when you've done a practice exam, the exact same question is on the final, or during a lecture your professor gives you clicker questions. Then you notice in the final it's the exact same question. That there is probably an example of a good question that they have written and test exactly what they want to test. What we typically do is it's known as a STEM, but this is a call to action or the question. We want to focus on what is the question asking. What facts are relevant, what facts are irrelevant to the question STEM. Finally, there's the alternatives down the bottom there, which is just your answers. And we know that there are distractors and the correct answers. A distractor is something that is plausible, that'll take you off in a different direction. A foil is 2 things are similar, and both could be the answer based on different assumptions. So what can we do? First of all, to deal with foils and distractors, just cover up the answers. See if this strategy works for you. You may have done it before. Just cover them up and try and answer the question without it. This doesn't work for all multiple choice questions. However, this can help to keep short-term memory at a minimal level, so that you can think about each answer individually. You could then look at one by one, or see if you can just answer and then look for your answer. Restate anything you do not understand. If you find that you overthink questions or you assume too much, this can be a problem when we have 2 questions that I can't decide between, 2 answers that I can't decide between. just say B is the answer because of this, or C is the answer because of this, or B is different from C in what ways. We can start looking for the differences between them. If we continue to ask ourselves what is similar about both of them, then we will continue to squeeze those two answers together. We want to separate them by restating them based on the facts given. This can be incredibly time wasting if we're always like, well, B could be the answer because of this, but C could be the answer because of this. That's assuming too much. If you notice you're doing that, if you're overthinking the answers, stop, pause, have a look at the facts, and then based on these current facts, B is the answer because of this, or C is the answer because of this. We encourage students not to change unless you can see that you made it. If you have time at the end to review your answers, don't change them. Sometimes we feel exhausted at the end and we're just relieved to get to the end, so we go through and we're not in the same state of mind as when we did answer it. So unless you clearly made a mistake, sometimes we go haphazardly through our questions too when we're doing our review. Again, because we're so excited to be finished that it's over. Keep them as they are unless you know you made a mistake. Use a guessing letter if you have to. Educational guess is much better, but statistically you're better if you just use the same letter for all the questions that you're guessing for. You might have a better chance. Statistically, you have a better chance of getting something right. Using underlining and circling, I think most students do this. Definitely do this. Is that if you've been using graphic organizers, tables, and concept maps, hierarchical images, then you'll be able to, or diagrams, you'll be able to, these would be actively reminding you of those shapes as well, so it could help to aid memory. Crossing out is not essential, but can help to, if it's a paragraph long case study, then it helps to really focus in. If circling doesn't do that, then and you find yourself rereading the whole question, start crossing out things that aren't necessary. That'll bring down the time that you need to spend. Filtering through, going through and actually answering all the questions that you do. Finding those ones that you can answer. If you're doing 50 questions, 50 minutes, there's a minute per question. There's going to be some questions you can answer in 15 seconds or 10 seconds, just reading it and you know the answer. Boom. Next. There could be just been a few seconds, so you save yourself anywhere from 30 to 45 seconds. So how can you save all of that time and use that on questions? Just by filtering through. Go through, find all those ones, come back, start again. So skipping quite a lot. This is a tough strategy for students to get on board with. I do not recommend filling in the Scantron as you go. I recommend going through, circling your answers, and then doing the Scantron at the very end. So circling the answers on your question sheet, and then filling in the Scantron at the end. Finally, using true or false with all questions, especially combo questions and difficult wording. Let's have a look at a couple examples. This is what I mean by a combo question, where you're given 4 different phrases, 4 different facts or concepts, examples, and then you have to be able to say which 3 are exemplify the particular concept you're looking at. So we say don't do this. Short-term memory can't hold all 4 of these things in mind and manipulate them all at once. So what we want to do is we want to look at them individually and just say if they're true or false. And now we can work with 3 T. Short-term memory can work with 3 little t's and 1 f. It can work with that. Working with these examples all at once is difficult to manipulate. So now it's very easy to go back and choose our answer. The same with confusing language. Just go through and answer if this had, ignore the not, cover up the not, and then just answer true or false, and then we find our answer a little bit easier. Instead of trying to keep each of these in mind, it can just be any confusing language can clog up short-term memory. Short answer questions, we encourage students to remind themselves of DICE, definitions of the definition or a statement of what the particular concept is. Importance, characteristics, example. Example is pretty clear. Characteristics just means breaking it down. Importance means you're answering the question, so what? Who cares? Asking yourself about this particular concept, what is its significance? What does it bring to the table? So this here is, these 4 things are 4 different things that go into a little bit more depth about that particular topic. Essay questions, before we prepare, like I said, we do have a workshop for this, so I'd highly recommend you attend that. But one thing that we can do is, one one thing that we can do today is study by themes. Make a list of all the themes that you need to cover. Then make a list of all your readings. Once you've got your list of readings and a list of themes, put that on one piece of paper. Start drawing connections. Start drawing lines across, knowing, before you even ask this question, which ones are connected where, and then asking this question, why is the reading important? How do they contribute to each theme? Now you start making a list. Okay, so it's a part of this theme and this theme. These three things, this short story, this poem, and this novel all contributed to our theme on myths and legends, or character development, or violence. How did they show that? How did they demonstrate that? Then finally we start, based on these connections, if we see three things associated with one theme, that's a great predictor of a compare-contrast type question. Now, we're not going to write essays for each of these. We just make outlines. How would I do it? So finding some evidence. What would your stance be in answering that question? What would your thesis be? Making an outline of evidence and support, drawing on your argument, drawing on the content from those topics, from those texts. And then finally, the standard questions during the exam. Clearly read the question carefully. If you get this part wrong, then it doesn't matter what you write. Always make an outline before you start. Using examples from the readings to support your claims. Always want to offer up some evidence. This is going to be, this is essential. Logic and development of ideas are key. Be ready to move on. Keeping it short and sweet is essential when having to write 2 or 3 essays in a 2 or 3 hour period. The goal is to be clear and concise. Clear and concise. That's really what we want. We want to be excellent, not perfect. So being able to move on. Very, very direct in your statements. Problem solving. This one typically lends itself to a lot of practice problems. However, if we identify the wrong problem, this can be conceptually, we can solve it incorrectly or not even know how to begin. So we want to be able to, number one, know how to classify problems. We want to know the basic processes for each type of problem and its variations. So are there variations to the types of problems we're having here? This here can be, we can learn the mechanics and the processes by doing a lot of practice problems, but classifying can be tricky. So we want to be able to write some concept questions in our preparation. Explaining a repeated process, if there's something that needs to be used. For example, in a calculus class, you might have several examples of taking derivatives using the chain rule. So add a technical question or a concept question that asks you to explain how the chain rule works. Define specific rules. Following our calculus example, we all remember that many well-known functions have specific derivatives that must be learned. So a good question could be to ask yourself, list 6 common functions and their derivatives. That could be a great way to get that information, to overlearn that information so it comes quicker. Annotating a complicated example. Give a complicated example of a certain type of problem from your assignment or from the textbook. We want to annotate it, so break out all the steps. So you might have yourself provide a detailed annotation on each step, explaining the logic behind each one. So taking some time to really reinforce this information. You don't do this typically when we go through practice problems. We just go through the motions. We're just getting through it. What we want to do is we want to understand the glue that sticks these steps together. So taking the time, this here will only reinforce and make us more efficient when we come to doing our practice problems. Finally, review some rules. In many technical courses, a big part of the challenge is figuring out which technique to apply to a given problem. So a good question might have you discuss the criteria for choosing a set of different techniques for a certain type of problem. Explain the conditions of use. Finally, the same other rules will apply. We want to filter through the easier ones to the harder ones. Use smaller numbers if you're struggling. Work backwards if you're struggling, showing all steps and all of your work. If you're running out of time, we still want to do this the best that we can. Slowing yourself down is a great way to use some of those deep breaths to manage that stress at the time. You can refine your strategies. You may be doing some of these, but consciously aware that you're not doing these for these particular reasons. Make sure that you're applying them. Sometimes you do it once or twice. We want to be doing these to be as efficient as possible. you're going to be taking a lot of tests during your whole degree, so we might as well start refining them now. One last mention here is taking care of yourself psychologically. Take care of yourself, manage your time, manage your stress. We've got a bunch of different strategies for this. We'll talk more about it in the winter semester, but again, this is do the basics. Get some sleep, get some exercise, start creating the balance in your life, start designing, using time management to design and plan the way you want the rest of the semester to go. Taking it away, stop fighting with procrastination, stop avoiding it, stop fighting, stop worrying. Get into it, start taking action, and you'll start getting stronger and stronger. Plan ahead. Start designing how you want the rest of the semester to go. Test appropriate practice. Tap your exams. Really get into finding out how you're going to be prepared, how you can prepare for these the best you can. Refine your test strategies. Keep getting better and better. And finally, take care of yourself. 45 minutes, 35 seconds. Not too bad. Pretty close to what I wanted. All the best on your exams, and we will see you at the next seminar in January. Please reach out to fstart@UAlberta if you have any questions or you require any resources. Please ask early. Thanks a lot.